Mall of America. It's home to world-class shopping, great dining, and amazing attractions and events. And these are our stories, presented by Bloomington, Minnesota Travel and Tourism. Hey, Mall of America fans, welcome to So Much More. I am Jill Renzel, your host for today's episode, and we have a very special episode because it is our milestone 100th episode of So Much More. We've been bringing you lots of stories and fun things to share, but today is going to be so much more. So we have some amazing guests on the show today, and today is truly a Twin Cities legend. He's been waking us up, cracking us up, and keeping us company for more than 3 decades. He's one of the longest running and most recognized voices in Minnesota media, Dave Ryan and the Dave Ryan in the Morning Show for KDWB. So join me with a celebration with our 2 incredible co-hosts, Dan and SJ. Thanks for joining. Of course, Dave, thank you for joining us for our milestone episode.
Well, you got me all built up. I was excited who's going to be here. I was like, wow, is Ken Barlow going to be here? That'd be really cool.
Even better, we have you. And
wow, okay.
We have so many years of fun stories with you. You have helped us achieve great success here at Mall of America and so many fun events and stories. But let's start off with you. 3 decades in this wonderful marketplace, and you're joining us for a special anniversary celebration. So help us understand what keeps you showing up every morning for this marketplace.
First of all, thanks for having me here. I'm honored to be on the podcast, and especially on the 100th magical episode. I remember when I got here 32 years ago, I'd been fired twice in Phoenix. So I got fired from a station out there. Then I went to work for another station, and then they fired me too. So I was like, well, what do I do now? And then a friend of mine who worked at KDWB for Steve Cochran said, hey, Steve just got let go. Before this job goes public, send in your stuff. And back then, you sent in a cassette. Okay, you don't remember cassettes.
For those of you that don't know what a cassette is, that's what we had back in the day.
You're too young, Sarah. You don't know what a cassette is. But you would send in a cassette of what you sounded like. So I sent it in, and I said, "Oh, I'm never going to get this job. It's a big job. It's KDWB." Because the whole industry knows KDWB. And so I thought, well, they're going to get somebody who's really good. And they were, for long story short, they settled on me. I think probably because I was the most affordable. No, I was very affordable, very affordable. And so they offered me the job, and I thought if I last here 2 or 3 years, that would be a pretty good run. I would have never imagined lasting this long. I mean, whoever goes to a job and thinks they're going to be there for 32 years. But
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah. Is there a story there?
I'm right behind you.
How long?
Over 27 years.
See, look at that. Yeah. But you never thought you'd be here?
No. But you get caught in the rhythm, and you get addicted to being able to make people happy and working with amazing people. And those years just fly by.
Yeah. And if it works and you're having fun, then it's something that I didn't want to go somewhere and get fired again. So I thought, well, let's just stay here. And they haven't fired me yet. So
it's a big win.
It's a big win, Sarah. So it's going well.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, you keep it fresh every day. How do you do that? How do you start your day and know that you're walking into a space that you're connecting with people across the Twin Cities and across the nation, because you guys are streaming. So it's like, how do you stay fresh with the content that you're sharing?
I love coming up with ideas. So I am fortunately blessed with a mind that comes up with ideas. 80% of them are bad, 10% are dangerous, and 10% are good. So then those 10% are what keep us going. And I've always enjoyed being creative, and I think it comes from, a background of growing up watching, 1970s sitcoms and watching game shows and consuming all of that entertainment and being around funny parents. My parents were both very funny. So I just kind of grew up being creative. So we usually have more ideas for the show than we know what to do with. So there's a million ideas we haven't gotten to because they're either bad or they're dangerous or illegal. So we just keep coming up with ideas, Jill.
So in other words, you're saying you're a risk taker.
I like to take risks. I think that you do have to take risks. And it's funny because radio has changed and it's much more corporatized. Is that a word? I think it is. And so you have to be careful about what you do so we don't get in trouble. As a matter of fact, I was warned not too long ago that if I'm going to do anything that's risky, I got to run it by corporate. Well, then if you run it by corporate, they take 18 weeks to approve it.
Yes.
And by
Then
that
you've
time,
lost the
the
window.
moment has passed. Yeah. So, yeah, but for the most part, they trust me to come up with, palatable legal ideas. Yeah.
Who decides what 80% is bad? I'm just curious of all of your ideas. Are you the one who goes like?
No, it's 80% is bad. You said that right. Okay,
Yes.
80% is bad. Me?
Okay.
I'm the worst. Well, this is what I do, Dan. A lot of the time I'll be like, I've got an idea. What if we have somebody da-da-da-da-da-da, and if the room reacts with silence, then I know. And I immediately say, I can tell by your lack of reaction that you don't like that idea. Yep. And that's fine. Some of my ideas, I just need to run them by somebody else to find out whether they're good or not. Yep. And then the people that I work with, they're very kind, but they're never going to say, oh, yeah, that's a great idea.
Amazing.
Yeah, but if it's a good idea, they'll be like, oh,
yeah.
I like that. And plus, I get ideas from other people on the show, too.
Sure. So what's one of the most outrageous ideas that you brought forward that almost got you fired?
Okay. Well, it depends on how spicy you want to get. Now, we're not going to get adult-oriented at all, but this is a little bit spicy.
This is a family-friendly show.
No, and we'll keep it family-friendly. Years ago, when the internet was kind of new and popping, for an April Fool's Day joke, I said, I got an idea. Let's have a commercial on the radio for a website called Pets by Mail.
Oh, no.
So, yeah, you're already ahead of me. So the commercial aired online, KDWB. Hey, do you want a new dog? Do you want a new cat? Do you want a new hamster? Go online to petsbymail.com and you can order a pet, and it's guaranteed to arrive alive. Okay? and so, which made people go, what? What is this? What? And so on April Fool's Day, the website went live, and it was petsbymail.com, and it said April Fool. And but it didn't end there. So people didn't think it was funny. People got really angry. And to cut to the chase, people from around the country, you look up who owns the website. You can look up the name and address of who owns the website. At least you could back then. And so somebody called the sheriff. I answered the door. There's a sheriff at my door who thought we must have a puppy mill in the basement. And I explained to him, and he's just a deputy doing his job. I said, it's just an April Fool's joke. There's no puppy mill here. And he said, well, take it down. And I said, yeah, that's probably a good idea. So it got a lot of attention, but not maybe the kind of attention that we wanted. So
I love it.
Oh, my goodness.
Petsbymail.com. And I'm a pet lover.
We will make note of that.
Yes, we're not going to do that one.
So you have celebrated a lot of exciting things with us, whether we've had new rides that have opened, we've done different contests in the Rotunda. What are some of your favorite memories of being at Mall of America and supporting some of our crazy ideas that we've probably came up together and probably pushed the limits a little bit and took some risks?
Were you there? You had to have been there for the NSYNC event. Now, what do you remember? Let me turn it back on you. What do you remember? And then I'll tell you what I remember about the NSYNC
we had them
event.
here twice. The first time, the crowd was manageable because it was on their way up, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people didn't know who they were. And I think we worked together a lot from the radio station with us, with those pop stars, where we were giving them time on air to start giving them some traction, but also visibility at the mall so that they could meet and greet their fans. So the first time, it was a manageable crowd. Not a lot of people knew who they were. They came back. It wasn't even a year later, and it was bananas. There were thousands of screaming girls. We actually had our security team putting all of us on the events team because I started as an event intern at that time, and I was a coordinator. By the time NSYNC came around, we had to wear the bright orange vest because they didn't want to lose us in the crowd of people. And I remember being picked up literally like a puppy on the back of my shirt, like in the vest, and pulling me up on the stage because they thought that I was just going to get lost in the sea of people. But it was crazy. But that was the late 90s. It was so much fun. We had so many of those pop stars here, but NSYNC was one of my favorites because these guys know that Justin Timberlake was one of my favorites of all time.
Oh my God, he's so cute.
He is so cute.
Now, do you remember the water balloon incident?
Oh, yes, yes.
Now, the way I remember it is not entirely clear, so I might have something wrong, but it was just getting started. So thousands of girls that had lined up since, 4 o'clock in the morning, and now it's 5 o'clock or so. Does that sound right in the afternoon? And so they're just getting started, and I think they got up on stage for a heartbeat, and somebody from the top level threw a water balloon, and it landed near NSYNC. It didn't hit anybody. It was a water balloon, but the security said, "Nope, event's over," and they hustled them all out. And that was the end. And all these girls got to see NSYNC for, and their parents were upset because they'd driven them down and sat around and had Auntie Anne's pretzels all day and done nothing but wait for this to happen. And so about 5-ish years ago, we got a phone call because we were talking about this on the radio. We got a phone call from the guy who did it, or at least claimed to do it.
Okay.
Now, I don't know why he would make it up.
Yeah.
But he, if I remember his story right, he said, "Yeah, I threw a water balloon, but I didn't plan it to be malicious, and I didn't know it would close the whole event down. But the guy is still out there floating around somewhere who can take credit for ruining that event." But there were so many other events that we did. The Jonas Brothers, when they were new,
I remember.
They were over by
Above Lego on the bridge.
Above the Lego bridge,
Yep.
And we stood up there with the Jonas Brothers, and as far as you could see were girls
Yes. Yep.
peeking around the kite-eating tree.
Yes.
And peeking around the the roller coaster, and that was cool. That was just a really, really cool event.
Yeah, that came full circle for us because our sister property out in New Jersey, American Dream, they just hosted Jonas Con. And so they had a major event with the Jonas Brothers. So we're talking with them again.
Yes.
So maybe stay tuned, listeners and viewers. Hopefully we can get them back here for a little reunion tour.
Yes.
Well, it's funny because we've also had people out here who nobody knew who they were.
Yeah.
Britney Spears came out before anybody knew.
I'm so sad I missed it.
Yeah, nobody knew who she
Legend.
was. I wasn't here for that one, but Angie Taylor from our radio station was, and I guess they talked backstage, and she was in her "Hit Me, Baby, One More Time" outfit, and people would walk by and. Let's go to the bookstore. So and then I think Kenny Chesney was also here before anybody knew who he was. About 2000 or so. And so you guys have hosted all kinds of acts in the Rotunda or on the Lego Bridge at different here's another one. When American Idol was really big, we did a show out here, and Randy Jackson was here, and Mariah Carey was here, and I don't know if Simon or Paula were here, but definitely Randy and Mariah.
Paula's been out here, but I don't think it was for that event.
For something else, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that was just really cool because American Idol was blowing up. And I remember very clearly that they were doing an interview on KARE 11, and Mariah was late. And so they're on KARE 11, the morning show, and they're like, "Yeah, we're here at Mall of America for American Idol, and any minute, Mariah Carey's going to be here." And so here comes Mariah Carey, and she had to step up onto a riser about as big as the table in front of you, which you can't see, which is about 2 feet high. And she was wearing a tiny little mini dress, and she was, very careful to step up on the mini dress. And they handed her a stick mic because they didn't have a time to pin a lavalier mic on her. And it was a very Mariah moment.
I know the stories are endless, and it's so much. When you brought up Britney Spears, and you also talked about cassettes earlier, we received boxes, like pallets of her cassette tape. And we were no one knew who she was. And we had all these cassette tapes. And we didn't distribute all of them because it was a smaller crowd that came because they didn't know. So we threw them all away. And now, like back in the day, you're like, oh my gosh, that would have been worth.
Yes.
But it was we were laughing because it was like, it was a little cassette single for Hit Me Baby One More Time.
Yeah.
It's just so fun to look back at all the celebrities and people we've had, which brings me to the next question. You've interviewed so many people over the years. So I'm curious if there's some of those standout memories of people that you've interviewed, whether it was their personality or just where the conversation or interview went, if you have some fun stories to share with us.
Yeah, we were actually, I was going to bring up Bob Saget because he was such a great interview. But now, and just coincidentally, and this is true, we were broadcasting from Mall of America that day, and I didn't even think about that till just now. But he was just wonderful and down to earth, and you really felt like you were talking to a friend. And I think I remember asking him, everybody asks, who is your influence? Who did you grow up? And I said, who have you influenced? And he was really happy to get a chance to say, here are some of the people that I think I have influenced. And it was, so one of the things in an interview is you don't want to ask the questions that everybody asks. Like if you're going to interview Paul McCartney, what's the first question that comes to mind? What's your favorite Beatles song? It's a good question, but he's been asked that a million times. So you try to come up with a question, and I forget who it was that, Larry David asked him, you ever been punched in the face?
Oh my gosh.
Now, that's a great question because nobody has ever asked Paul McCartney, have you ever been punched in the face?
Had he?
Yes, that's what I want to know.
I think he had.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he had.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But I think that's the thing is you always try to come up with questions like I asked Alanis Morissette one time. I said, same question. Everybody asks you, who were your influences? And it was right around the time Avril Lavigne was getting big. And I said, who do you think you have influenced? And I knew the answer was probably going to be Avril Lavigne because they do sound alike and their styles are similar. And she was very kind and very professional. She looked over at her manager and her manager gave her a look that said, yeah, don't say Avril Lavigne. And so she said, yeah, there are a few, but, I'd really rather not talk about them. So again, you try to ask the questions that they don't get asked a million times because they get so bored with it.
Through your years, I'm sure you've mentored a bunch of people and worked with people starting their career in broadcasting. Who have you influenced?
Well, quite a few, Dan.
And can you teach me to have a deep voice like you have? Because I'm so jealous.
Well, thank you. There have been a lot of people that I've been lucky to have worked with on their rise. Let's put it that way. Crisco over at KS95. Wonderful person. He started as an intern on KDWB when he was 18 years old and went to Brown Institute. And we saw something in him because he's funny and he's your friend instantly. Yep. When you meet Crisco, he's your friend. And he's one of those personalities that we all envy that people just love him right away. And so he would have done well with or without me, but we happened to be the first radio station, the morning show that he started on. I would say also intern John, who you don't know, but he's a big star out in D.C. and Baltimore, and he does comedy tours and radio. He got his start as an intern on our show. Fallon was on her way up, and then she came on our show, and that kind of, it's not me, it's the power of KDWB and our morning show, and then that kind of helped launch Fallon. Angie Taylor, who was the one that I said was backstage with Britney Spears, she was on our show early in her career. First morning show, she used to be the beer tub girl at a place called Waterworks. Now, you might remember Waterworks.
I remember Waterworks.
It was a club up in Centerville, and it was on a lake. It was just your regular, dance club, whatever. And Angie used to be the girl that stood behind the beer tub, the big beer tub, and handed out bottles of beer. And then she got on the radio. She has a giant personality. So there are some of the people that have come through our show over 30, and there have been many, many more. And a lot of them you lose track of. I'd like to know where a lot of them are, but I've lost track of them.
Do a little reunion tour.
Yeah.
So what moment in your career still gives you goosebumps?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
And I don't really know that anybody has ever asked me that question before.
There, I got a good one.
I would say when I got this job, for sure. But as far as achievements or something really, really cool, I would say probably flying with the Blue Angels and flying with the Thunderbirds.
Wow.
Because I am an Air Force kid. My dad was in the Air Force, and I love airplanes. I fly airplanes myself. And my dad was a pilot back in World War II. And so the Thunderbirds come to town, and they want to do media rides because they want to give, the Ken Barlows and the Dave Dahls, and they want to give, those people a ride. And so they'll talk about it and promote the show. So, but you have to apply for it. So you have to write in and say why I think I deserve this, whatever. And so I wrote in and I said, my dad was in the Air Force. I went to a high school at the Air Force Academy, which I did. It was a public school.
Okay.
At the Air Force. I was born at the Air Force Academy, and my first job was selling hot dogs at the Air Force Academy.
My gosh.
So I knew, man, if they read this application,
You're in.
So when they selected me, it was like, the Thunderbirds are like rock stars to me. And so I got to fly in them. I didn't throw up, but we went from doing this to doing this, and I'm gesturing, and if you're listening, I'm waving my arms around like a crazy flight pattern, and then I said, I don't feel so good, so he slowed down. We just kind of cruised around and took it easy, but it was still really, really cool.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
So KDWB does an amazing job with the community, and you personally do as well. What would you say are some of those really memorable but also meaningful and purposeful moments that you've had being in the seat that you're in to be able to have the impact on the community?
There are many that come to mind. I'll give you probably the biggest one we ever did was in about 97. There were floods up in Grand Forks. Now this goes back. Not all of my stories are really old, but this one is really old. So we go back to 1997, bad flooding in Grand Forks. So KDWB had an idea to ask every radio station in town to come downtown in front of Target Center to broadcast live for what we called flood relief. So every radio station in the Minneapolis area was downtown, lined up along First Avenue in front of Target Center. Yep. And so people would bring down, brooms and mops and bleach and towels and all these things they needed, and we loaded up semi after semi after semi. And just the idea that we got every radio station, competitors and other radio stations to do one common purpose, and that was our idea. We thought that was really cool to be able to, and nobody said, I'm not going to do it. Yeah. Everybody came down because it was all a community kind of a thing, and you throw away the competition. Everything, and then there's little things like, staying up all night to broadcast to raise money for, Children's Hospital. I'm sure we've done a couple. We did some sort of radiothon here, I'm sure. I cannot remember exactly what it was for. And then everything from, I ride motorcycles, so I do this thing every year called Roger's Rescue Ride. Roger is our adopted foster whatever cat. I'm not a big fan of this cat. He's my wife's cat. The cat and I have no love for each other. I'm kind to him, but he never comes and hops up on my lap. It's always on my wife's lap. But we do Roger's Rescue Ride. So we do a motorcycle charity run every fall. And the list goes on. Because I think that, that's just one of the things that you get to do and are also expected to do when you can influence people to participate and raise money for charity.
Well, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we worked together 3 years ago. I want to say it was for the back to school timeframe, and we had to stuff the bus, which was your big concept that I feel like you guys shot your shot, if you will.
Yeah.
It was a shoot your shot. You're like,
was that 3 years ago?
I think so. And we brought a physical school bus. I remember we got the
down
email.
over here.
Yeah, it was.
In the North Garden, and we had a donation for school supplies, and we donated to Minneapolis Public Schools, and you came out and you met a bunch of people. But it was such a funny conversation with you guys internally. It was one of your big ideas. You're like, let's just see how it goes. And we were like, please come in. We would love to have you. And it was such a success.
Funny story about that. So we're down there and we're having people, bring by notebooks, bring by, whatever they need for school. And people would, bring by their box of whatever. And I'd say, take it in the bus and set it in there. Now, most people got it. But one family came by, God bless their pea-picking little hearts. They got on the bus and they started picking out things.
Oh, no.
Yeah, they're like, I'll get that notebook. Oh, there's a box of pencils.
This looks good.
And that looks, and I did not, Dan, have the heart to tell them. I didn't want to embarrass them.
They need it. Yeah.
I said, I'm like, okay, yeah, good. You kids have a good day.
Aww.
So it just would have felt bad. Like, put that back down.
Yep.
That's not for you.
But thank you for using your platform, your voice, your presence in the community to make a difference. Because as much as you say it's expected, it's still a choice that you make. And being able to make such an influence in this marketplace, working with us to make a difference in the community.
Well, thanks for giving us the opportunity. Yeah, absolutely. Tying
it
in with somebody like Mall of America. It's good. It's a win-win.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of So Much More, a Mall of America podcast. Stay tuned next week for part 2 of our amazing discussion with Dave Ryan. We'll see you then. This show is presented by Bloomington, Minnesota Travel and Tourism.